The day I turned 16, my mother told me her new twins deserved the resources I was using. She didn't just kick me out, she priced me out. I haven't spoken to her since. Yesterday, she found out about my promotion and showed up at my door, not to apologize, but to present me with a bill for a family I was never part of. The knock on my door was an anomaly. My life, carefully constructed over years of diligent work and emotional austerity, was not one accustomed to unannounced visitors. I had built a fortress of quiet competence, and the sound was a stone against its walls. It was a Tuesday evening, the soft, blue light of dusk settling over the city, and I was relishing the silence of my apartment, a silence I had earned. Through the peephole, the past stared back at me, distorted by the fisheye lens but unmistakable, my mother, and beside her Harry. A cold knot tightened in my stomach. It had been nearly 17 years since I had last seen them, since the day they had so deftly engineered my exit from their lives. 17 years of radio silence, of birthdays and graduations unnoticed, of a chasm of indifference, so wide I had long stopped peering into its depths. My first, foolish, heartbreaking instinct was a flicker of hope. Had they come to make amends? Had some late-life clarity shown them the wreckage they had left in their wake? That hope died the moment I opened the door. There was no contrition in their eyes, only a kind of weary, entitled calculation. "We heard we needed to talk to you in person," my mother said, her voice a familiar stranger's. "No hello. No, how have you been?" It was as if the last 2 decades were a brief, inconvenient intermission. Against my better judgment, I let them in. They walked into my home, their eyes scanning my belongings, the tasteful furniture, the art on the walls, the view of the city skyline, with an appraisal that felt less like admiration and more like an audit. I saw the unspoken confirmation in their glances. The rumors were true. I was successful. The story of how I got here is written in the scars they inflicted. My mother had me at 20, a product of a short-lived romance with a man who wanted no part of fatherhood. She, in a fit of bitterness or pride, she never quite decided which, let him vanish without a fight for child support. We were a duo, her and I against the world. She had the unwavering support of my grandparents, who helped her finish her education and find her footing. I remember those early years as a time of struggle, but also of a fierce, singular love. She was my everything, and I believed I was hers. That belief began to erode when Harry entered the picture. He was a coworker, and when I was 8, they began dating. He wasn't a villain. We coexisted in a state of polite tolerance. He was the background character in my life, and I was the inconvenient appendage in his. When they married, the tectonic plates of my world began to shift. The distance was subtle at first, a missed school play, a conversation that ended when I entered the room, a new family portrait that felt like it had no frame for me. Then came the pregnancy. I was 12, and foolishly I was thrilled. A sibling, a chance to be part of a real family. I did everything I could to be helpful, to be involved. But my presence seemed to be an irritant to my mother. Her patience, once a deep well, had run dry. Every offering of help was met with a sigh, every attempt at connection with a closed door. I learned to make myself scarce, to shrink my presence in the hope that I would become small enough to be overlooked. I succeeded too well. 6 months after the twins were born, when I had just turned 16, they called me for a serious conversation. We sat in the living room that no longer felt like mine. Harry did most of the talking, his tone that of a corporate executive delivering unfortunate but necessary downsizing news. "It's just the finances," he said, not meeting my eyes. 2 web engineers' salaries can only stretch so far. With 2 new babies, it's a strain. I remember the cold disbelief washing over me. We had never wanted for anything. We lived in a nice house, took vacations. This was a flimsy pretext, and we all knew it. "I can get a job," I pleaded, my voice trembling with the desperation of a child fighting for her place. "I can help. I'll pay for my own things." It was my mother who delivered the final, gutting blow. Her voice was calm, cold, and utterly final. "It's not about the money, not really. We need to save our resources, our money, our energy, our time, for the children who deserve it more." Deserve. The word hung in the air, poisonously precise. It wasn't that they needed more, it was that they were inherently more worthy. I was a burden they were finally legally allowed to shed. They hadn't technically evicted me, they were too clever for that. They had simply made it impossible to stay, counting on my dignity to do the rest. It did. I left that night with a single suitcase, the sting of their rejection a fresh brand on my soul. I went straight to my grandparents, who were horrified but felt trapped by their desire to remain in their new grandchildren's lives. At 16, I got a part-time job. I saw my mother and Harry occasionally during their visits with the twins. They were formal, distant, as if I were a vaguely familiar acquaintance. They looked happy, lighter. My absence was the missing piece in their perfect family puzzle. College was a battle I fought alone. They declined to help, again citing the need to save for the twins' future. I took out loans, and it was only through the immense kindness of an uncle who co-signed on the condition he'd never be financially responsible that I was able to attend. I worked multiple jobs through university, a grinding cycle of classes and shifts, fueled by a bitter determination to prove them wrong. My mother didn't call when I graduated. My grandparents were there, beaming with a pride that was tinged with sadness. She had not even acknowledged the day. The early years of my career were a tightrope walk over a chasm of debt. I lived on ramen and ambition, paying my bills and chipping away at my student loans. But I was relentless. I climbed the ranks at the company that had given me my first break, my hunger and resilience setting me apart. The struggle had forged in me a strength my codded colleagues lacked. By 33, I had achieved what I once thought impossible, a senior management role, financial security, a life of comfort and quiet accomplishment. I had kept the promotion quiet, a private victory. I told only a few trusted people, including my uncle, wanting to thank him for the lifeline he had thrown me years ago. It was a mistake born of gratitude. At a family gathering, he mentioned my success to my mother. He meant well, I know he did. He thought it might bridge the gap. Instead, it lit a fuse. And so, they stood in my living room, their presence an invasion of my hard-won peace. They didn't lead with congratulations. They led with disappointment that I had kept my success from them. They were hurt, they claimed, that I had shut them out, as if my exile had been a mutual decision. They gaslit me with breathtaking audacity, insisting that as a teenager, I should have understood their need to rearrange their priorities and should have supported their decision. Then came the true purpose of their pilgrimage. Their own business venture had failed. They were in financial ruin. The twins were approaching college age. "You can make it up to us," my mother said, her tone implying a debt I had never agreed to owe, by paying for your siblings' tuition. The sheer, staggering entitlement of it stole my breath. They had cast me out, refused me support, and now, seeing I had built a castle from the rubble they left, they felt entitled to a room in it. I laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "No," I said, the word feeling clean and powerful on my tongue. "I will not be doing that." The conversation devolved rapidly. I reminded them of the student loans, the jobs, their own words about who deserved their resources. They, in turn, reached new depths of absurdity, accusing my teenage self of being overenthusiastic and irritable. They invoked the years my mother had raised me alone, as if her fulfilling a basic legal and moral obligation was a favor for which I owed eternal tribute. This was your chance to make it up to her. Harry snapped. "Make what up?" I shot back, my voice rising. "What, exactly did I do?" "Exist. Rely on my parent as a child. You don't get to abandon a child and then demand a return on an investment you never made." I finally ordered them out, threatening to call the police. As they left, my mother hurled one last poisonous dart. "After all my sacrifices, you're just ungrateful. You're portraying me as the villain." The door closed, but her words echoed in the silence. For a few days, they festered. Had I been too harsh? Was there a sliver of truth in her warped narrative? The doubt was a ghost in my machine. Then the emails started. Every other day, a new missive cataloging her sacrifices, a desperate attempt to build a cage of guilt. I broke my own rule and replied, laying out the cold, hard facts of her abandonment. The response was a torrent of abuse. Ungrateful. Selfish. I blocked her, but she created new addresses, a digital hydra of harassment. It was then I knew I had been right all along. This wasn't about family, it was about extraction. The situation escalated from the bizarre to the terrifying. She showed up at my office. Fortunately, I had taken the day off, sick with a stress that was now clearly prophetic. The receptionist called me, and I could hear my mother's raised voice in the background. I got on the phone, my voice cold steel. "If you attempt anything at my place of employment," I told her, "I will sue you until you're too ashamed to send your children to college. You cannot afford a lawsuit, and my employer will not be as forgiving as I have been." The threat worked. She left, but the incident was a warning shot. I consulted a lawyer, seeking advice on a restraining order. We agreed that while her office visit was concerning, it might not be enough for a judge. We didn't have to wait long for the necessary evidence. A few days later, I returned home from work to find her waiting outside my door, a storm contained in human form. I told her to leave, or I would call the police. What happened next was a blur of shocking violence. She didn't just argue. She screamed and launched herself at me, throwing me to the ground. My phone skittered across the hallway floor. As she tried to beat me, she cursed me, blaming me for every failure in her life. For a moment, I was too stunned to react. This was the woman who had once sung me lullabies. But youth and a regimen of self-care born from a need for control gave me the advantage. I overpowered her just as my neighbors, alerted by the commotion, spilled into the hall and restrained her until the police arrived. This time, there was no hesitation. I pressed charges. I filed for the restraining order. The facade of the wronged mother shattered, revealing the unstable, desperate woman beneath. The fallout was swift. I learned through the grapevine that Harry, horrified, had taken the twins and moved in with his parents. My mother had apparently turned her rage on him, too. My grandparents, finally seeing the unvarnished truth, told me they no longer wanted anything to do with her. Sitting in my lawyer's office, signing the final paperwork for the restraining order, I felt not triumph, but a profound, clean sense of closure. The hope that had flickered when I opened my door was finally completely extinguished. She had tried to convince me I was the villain in her story, but her own actions had written the final chapter. The money they so desperately wanted for the twins' college, it's still in my account, a testament to my own labor. The love and support they withheld, I built my own family, forged from friendship and chosen kinship. The door to the past is now legally barred, and I am finally unequivocally free. I am not the unwanted daughter anymore. I am the architect of my own life, and the foundation, though laid in hardship, is unshakably strong.